Well, today finds me on the east slopes of Mount Greylock, which is the highest mountain in Massachusetts and considerably higher than all the other mountains in Massachusetts. And I'm going to be spending about 6 hours exploring this east side of the park. You can drive right to the top. I don't have a lot of interest in climbing to a summit that you can drive to. But there's a couple ridges on either side of Mount Greylock that you have to hike to. One of which is called Ragged Mountain, which is supposed to have some interesting views from some rock ledges. Well, on the way up, we're stopping along what's called Peck's Brook, which has several series of waterfalls that come down off Mount Greylock. And despite being dry for a few weeks here, things are flowing quite well. So we'll be looking for waterfalls today and trying to get some views in early June here. It's about the second week of June. So we still got plenty of water coming down the mountain here. There's supposed to be more waterfalls on what's called the Bellows Pipes Trail, which heads up towards Ragged Mountain. And then there's a trail that goes up Ragged Mountain, which turns into an unofficial trail to several overlooks. This is all what I've read. I've never been here before. On this side of the mountain, I've done the Appalachian Trail through this area many years ago as a backpacker, but haven't day hiked this side of the park. So I'm always looking for these lesser known parts of these parks or lesser known trails. We'll be going up the Bellows Pipe Trail and looking for whatever's in bloom this time of year. This boulder here just caught my attention. Boy, that thing is just covered in rock fern. Just amazing how these plants will grow profusely in places where the other animals, the herbivores, can't get to them. So we'll be enjoying these falls as we go up, any more that we can find, and enjoying the views as they can be found as well. And as we ascend what I thought was called the Bellows Pipe Trail, which is what's indicated on all trails, and the printed information from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts indicates this trail is called the Bellows Pipe Trail, but all the signage says Bellows South Trail. So that's a formality in my opinion. I knew I was on the right trail based on the map, but there's a lot of other trails that aren't shown on some of the maps, including the ones printed by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, that weave in and out of this area. We've been on the trail about 20 minutes. First 20 minutes was actually old fields. A lot of small trees and bittersweet and multiflora rose, the kind of stuff I don't enjoy hiking through. But as we ascend the slopes of Mount Greylock here, we are getting into the kind of forest we would expect to find. Well, what's definitely called the Bellows South Trail, as I showed on that last clip, is easy to follow. There are a lot of mountain bike and even some ski trails that cross it, but it's well maintained and well marked. Pretty much goes straight up, but it's not extremely steep, and they've got plenty of water diversion bars to keep what could become a highly eroded trail from becoming that. The footing is never difficult. We're come up about 900 feet in elevation from the parking lot. Our total ascent to the top of Ragged Mountain will be about 1,200. So we've done a lot of the distance and a lot of the climb in the first 45 minutes of this hike. We're starting to see some more of the understory plants that you would find at higher elevations in New England. Some witch hobble here. Plenty of mountain maple on this hike. And you know, it's been a cool and dry spring so far, especially May and early June. Dew points well below normal. There's some freezing weather in May. But today is humid, and I'm sweating, and so is this rock. And this is not the first time I've found this type of quartzite sweating on a humid day when the other rocks are dry. So this rock is not wet from the rainfall, but it's actually cooler than the air itself, and because the dew point is high today, the water is condensing on this rock. So a lot of cool weather lately has caused this rock to stay cold, and it's well below the dew point of the air, so it's sweating. And this brown quartzite is common in western New England and parts of New York State. In New York State, it's called the Potsdam sandstone. There's another name for it in western New England, and I don't have it committed to memory. But it forms one of the significant layers in this part of New England. There's also a huge marble layer around here, and we should be able to see the quarries in Adams, Massachusetts from the top of Ragged Mountain. There's a huge quarry there where they actually mine marble for a lot of for basically the calcium carbonate. So we'll take a look at that if we can. Meanwhile, we'll keep ascending here. And just above that rock that was sweating, we come to a fork in the trail with a sign that's so old you can barely read it. We've got a right-hand fork which stays level, doesn't go up any further, and then one that continues a gradual ascent of Mount Greylock with the sign that's a little hard to make out. So always come prepared. Don't rely on cell phone service. Print off the maps or download them on your phone or your tablet. And we're going to take the right-hand fork here, according to my location that I just plotted on my phone and on the map. I believe the right-hand fork will bring us to the Ragged Mountain Trail. Boy, in these moist, steeper slopes of Mount Greylock Reservation are covered in jewelweed. And there's some stinging nettles in places too, but I've seen more jewelweed, which is the remedy for stinging nettles if you need one. You can crush up this plant and rub it on the stinging nettles where it's burning your skin. And mixed in with this jewelweed, got just a little bit of false Solomon seal. It's just about done blooming. And another plant that's just about done blooming that I found just up the trail here is our alternate leaf dogwood. And as the name implies, everything that a dogwood should be, as far as the branching goes, this one does not have that. So the leaves are alternate each other, and so are the branches. But the foliage resembles the other dogwoods with this it's called arcuate venation, where the veins basically make an arch shape. They bow around. You can see that clearly here, right there. But unlike the other dogwoods, which have branches that come off opposite each other, these come off in a staggered or alternating pattern, and so do the leaves. Actually, the leaves often make a whorl at the end of the branch, and in another whorl, but they are not in pairs like you would see on flowering dogwood. Another dogwood I would hope to find at the higher elevations today is our bunchberry or dwarf dogwood, which is actually a ground cover. It's not a tree at all, but it sure looks like a dogwood, except for its diminutive size. Well, here's what's left of the flower of this alternate leaf dogwood. It's quite showy, but it's just about done here. We'll try to find some that are a little better preserved as we hike today, and it will get a blue type berry that comes in bunches. Almost looks like wild raisin in appearance. So again, this is more of a northern tree found in the understory. I do have it on my other channel. That channel is called Barking Up the Right Tree, B-A-R-K-I-N apostrophe up the right tree. I did find it in Ohio when I was recording out there, but only in a few selected coves that were well protected and facing north, where it was much cooler in the summertime with better soil moisture. But it becomes quite common as you go north in the Appalachian Mountains, especially in places where the soil stays moist, and that jewelweed we just saw is an indication of that. And those fields of jewelweed continue for quite a distance after that alternate leaf dogwood. And we are to the junction of the Ragged Mountain South Peak Trail, which is blazed in blue. So back where the signage was hard to read, I made a decision based on the information on the map and my plotted location. I was pretty certain I was correct, and I was, but if I had turned the other way, I would have been going up a much steeper slope towards the summit of Mount Greylock in the Appalachian Trail. So we pretty much walked on level the last 10 minutes since that last junction. This is supposed to be quite rocky up here, even requires some scrambling. It says it's a half a mile to the South Peak. According to what I've read, the unofficial trails continue well beyond that. We'll see how much time we have to explore those as well. And yes, as advertised, this blue trail up Ragged Mountain does have some rocks, but this is typical New England hiking. The first mile and a half of this hike was cobbles only. There was no ledge. So this is what we come to expect in many of the areas of New England. And as you can see, there's a lot of paper birch up here, which indicates this area was probably burned by a forest fire in the not so recent past, or not so distant past. A lot of these trees aren't that old. The other hardwood trees that are here aren't that old either. And the fact that it did burn probably is the reason why there's expansive views to be had from the summit of this Ragged Mountain. Because given time, the trees will always, you know, block the views of most of these mountains. But let's keep climbing and see what's to be seen from the summit. We're getting near the top. Well, and plenty of wildflowers as we ascend this Ragged Mountain Trail. These aren't blue yet, but this is what's called blue bead lily. And what were delicate yellow flowers a few weeks ago are turning into these green fruits, and they do turn a very dark blue. And beautiful foliage. And I anticipated finding dwarf dogwood up here, because usually when you get up in elevation in New England, you do find it. And yes, dwarf is the right name for it. It's only as high as my hand. Has a dogwood flower. And it gets the red berries like a flowering dogwood would too as well. So it's like a flowering dogwood shrunk down. And we've got some open ledges starting to show up along this trail. I think there's going to be several of them. The main trail stays left. There's a spur trail right over here. And yes, we've got some Canada Mayflower that often blooms in May, but it's still blooming in second week of June at about 2,400 feet elevation here. There's your flower. And a nice overlook towards the higher summit to our west, which is Mount Greylock itself. So as we get more sun, we get a whole field of Canada Mayflower here. But it often grows in dense shade as well. And some trees that just don't grow in the deep shade, but often grow in these ledge areas where it's more open. One of which is our mountain ash, which is not an ash at all, but the foliage could resemble that of a white ash or a green ash. So there goes the common name. It's in flower right now, and these will become beautiful orange berries in late summer. And got this compound leaf and got a toothed edge along that. A couple species of mountain ash. I don't have the information in front of me how to tell them apart, but they look very similar to the untrained eye. And our view. We're about 1,000 feet lower than the summit of Mount Greylock, which was in the clouds a couple hours ago, but the ceiling or the bottoms of the clouds has lifted for now. There's some rain coming later today. I think it's going to be 6 or 7 hours from now, so hopefully the view will continue to open up as the day progresses. Beautiful monument up there, and a road to the top with great views from the top. Those have been thoroughly videoed, I'm sure, so I'm looking for places that have been less videoed or never videoed. Here's something that's got some berries on it that aren't quite ripe. This is our serviceberry, and I did a extensive study of serviceberry on my Barking Up the Right Tree channel a few weeks ago. It went from March till early June, and this may be a species that I couldn't find where I was doing that study. That study was done in Connecticut. We're at a higher elevation in Massachusetts, and there's several species that grow here that I did not put on that video. So we're going to just say that it's serviceberry at this point because it's not resembling the ones that I found in Connecticut. And we got somebody here making his way up that. So these berries become red and then eventually purple, and they're edible, but the birds like them, so catch them early. And serviceberry often has these little lines on the bark, like a lot of other trees on this mountain. They can help us identify it in the wintertime. Those little vertical stripes. And about 15 minutes past that last overlook with the serviceberry, mountain ash, and the view of the summit of Mount Greylock. The trail goes up and down over some ledges. Doesn't really climb a lot, but goes up and down. I think we're coming to the main view here. I start seeing low bush blueberry. That's a good sign because it often means something to eat. In midsummer, not yet, but in midsummer, and often means it's open enough to have a view. And sure enough, it does. And there is some summer-like haze in the air today, but it's not blocking the close-up view of the nearby mountains here. Like I said on that last lookout, eventually these trees would get big enough to make this view go away, unless the area is burned again. So I saw a lot of indication that it could have been burned. Paper birch up here. There's even a little bit of gray birch right here with its arrowhead shaped leaf, which is often grows in places that have been burned or disturbed. Roadsides, old fields. Plenty of mountain ash in bloom right here like we saw earlier, but even more of it for us to study right here. Be great to look at in a few months here. Those handsome orange berries. And let's see what view we can see today. We can see the summit of Mount Greylock. As before, there's a large landslide on the east side of it. May not come out too well because of the backlighting today, but it's right there in the center of your screen. That may have been from Tropical Storm Irene 12 years ago. And then there's a significant valley right here that runs between Mount Greylock to our west and the Hoosick Range to our east. The Hoosick Range is it's a little bit higher than where I'm standing now, but not quite as high as Mount Greylock. There's several natural overlooks right across the valley in that range as well, so that may be a place I explore in the future. A little bit more bouldering and down climbing over these boulders made out of schist. Most of this mountain is made out of schist, which is a metamorphic rock. Brings you down to an even better overlook. Again, east, southeast, southwest. We've got a great view here and we can see that mine or quarry down here that I talked about earlier. It really shows up as a large area on the satellite view. And that layer that they're mining there actually underlies this mountain. The schist is actually on top of it. And this schist is very similar to the rocks 30 miles east of here. And the geologists believe that this mountain range was actually pushed westward over the layer of marble in this valley. And sits right on top of it. So that marble down there, from what I've read, is not being quarried for marble like for building stone and countertops or monuments, but it's being quarried for calcium carbonate, which is one of the main ingredients in marble, and that is being used for pharmaceutical purposes, so basically for antacid. And they sure must be making a lot of it, because if you look at the satellite view, that's a huge pit there. You can't see it completely from this vantage. That's a large, large quarry there, and you can even see the trucks working today moving that stuff. Really zoom in, you can see them. Well, I've used up about half of my available time today to explore this mountain. There are more ledges northeast of here with unofficial trails leading to them. I saw some photos that other people have taken on those ledges. They look quite interesting, but my time is about up. I need to make a U-turn and start heading back. And we'll see what else we can find on the way back. There was a waterfall near the trail that I didn't explore that I might check out on the way back. If not, we'll do a recap of the trail we took and look at the trail map in detail. So anybody that wants to could retrace my course today and recreate this adventure for themselves. Well, we made pretty good time coming back down off of Ragged Mountain, down the Bellows South Trail. Let's take a little scenic detour down the Ribbon Falls Trails, which runs parallel to the Bellows South Trail back to where I parked. I saw this trail on the way up, but I didn't want to eat up too much time till I knew I had the time. So obviously I made a little better time coming back down. I found one falls already, and we'll see if we can find some more. Turned out to be a very pleasant afternoon, a lot of sun. Originally this was supposed to be a cloudy day with increasing chances of rain after 5 p.m. Well, it's 3:30 right now and it's very sunny. The rain has been put off several hours. So turned out to be a very pleasant day and feeling summer-like for a change. Well, it's very green back here. I see some lush woodlands here. I even see some maidenhair fern way off in the distance. We'll see if this trail gets closer to that. Boy, if you see maidenhair fern, which is hard to make out from here, but I can see it, it's instead of being a normal fern like these Christmas ferns with a central vein or stem with the fronds going off of it, it actually makes a circle. It's very common in the Ohio Valley. It's common where you have very high pH soils. So I suspect that we have that this waterfall back here has actually eroded down into the layer of marble that they're mining there. The mine we saw about an hour ago has exposed that layer, which I said lies underneath Mount Greylock. Well, if you dig deep enough, that's what you'll find. And the fact that I'm seeing maidenhair fern growing along this chasm here leads me to believe that that is true. We'll see if we can get a closer look at all these things as this trail weaves its way down through this little gorge here towards the parking lot. Well, this American beech caught my attention. It's grown around this rock. And then kind of got back to normal shape as it went above that rock. Of course, it was just a sprout when it started there, I'm sure, unless the rock rolled down into its pathway. Well, another plant that often indicates you're in a higher pH soil, which when you have marble nearby, or a lot of the volcanic rocks as well. I find this a lot on the trap rock ridges in Connecticut and New York and New Jersey. This is our basswood. I'm working on basswood right now on Barking Up the Right Tree. It's in production. I'll be publishing it this summer, probably in July sometime. It has these huge heart-shaped leaves on these sprouts here. These things are as big as my hand. And one quick way to identify basswood in the summertime or winter is by the sprouts, but also by these holes in it. Now, other trees can get these holes as well, but basswood often gets these holes in horizontal lines from what's called a yellow-bellied sapsucker, which is a type of woodpecker that pecks into the tree, drills in and tries to drink the sap that oozes out. Now, these are older holes. They're not oozing anymore. There's another row of them from another time. But often if you see a tree with a lot of these holes, it is a basswood. Not always, but it often is. And unlike the emerald ash borer, which is non-native, this is a native animal and it does not kill the tree. And there's many more trails than I expected to find on the way up to where we went this morning. Some of these were on all trails, but with all trails I never know if they're really trails or if they're just very lightly used trails. But these are well-used trails that weren't on the publication put out by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But they're here. The mountain bikers are using them. And yes, as you descend down that Ribbons Falls trails, we're really treated to a close-up view of this beautiful stream here. And this is the headwaters of that Peck's Brook that we looked at the start of this adventure. We can clearly see, yes, ribbons of waterfalls just gurgling their way down on both sides of this trail, right over bedrock. And here we got a falls. It's probably 15-20 feet high with another one right above it out of view here. On a warm day, I'm going to dip my hat in here and cool off a little. This mountain's just dripping with water. Despite not being that wet lately, there was above average snowfall in the late winter that probably took till almost May to completely melt and left the soil quite saturated. And these mountains often hold their water well, at least till early to midsummer. And then if we don't get consistent rains, these mountain streams will start to reduce in flow. But boy, what a neat place. And the fact that I studied the geology map of this area before this adventure, my suspicion that this was actually a layer of marble being exposed by this brook has been proven to be true. I never leave home without my Swiss Army knife for a lot of reasons. One of them is to take that steel knife to do a hardness test on rocks. And I just scratched this marble here with this pocket knife and left scratches in it. So I can clearly leave a mark on this softer marble rock, which is mostly calcium carbonate, which is what they were mining that huge quarry we saw a couple hours ago. So underneath the schist of Mount Greylock, there's a layer of marble that basically underlies this mountain and reemerges on the other side. And this mountain stream is cut right into it. It's creating these waterfalls, creating a lush habitat for some plants that we wouldn't find in the acid soils on top of the mountain or even on the mountainside, like that maidenhair fern. So I don't see a maidenhair fern growing right here for us to take a closer look at. But they're beautiful ferns and they're unique in their shape. And the sound of crashing water greets us as we finish this adventure. My time ran out that day at the bottom of Ribbon Falls where we were looking at the marble. I'm going to put the wraps on this adventure here and look at some of the trail maps. So I'm back in the area recording for another adventure. That'll be posted soon, but let's finish this one. I've come to Lower Pex Falls. This adventure started at the main Pex Falls, or the Upper Pex Falls, which is a pretty small falls compared to this lower one, but it's easier to see. This is more of a gorge, like a slot. We can see part of it right here. So let's take a better look, and then we'll look at the trail map and show exactly what I did. So this Pex Brook has created a very narrow slot in this layer of marble. And yes, I checked the hardness of this rock here too, and this is still very soft, and I can scratch it with the same pocket knife. So this layer of marble is underneath Mount Greylock, and this Lower Pex Falls is just a slot canyon. You can't even see the whole thing from right here. But it's quite pretty, and you can climb up different areas to see it in it, see the entire falls in its entirety. This is just downstream from the other falls where we started this. Got some mountain maple growing right here. Not uncommon to find this at the higher elevations. It's not uncommon to find it in areas where there's getting some sun. And just below this rock, you can see more of Lower Pex Falls. So it's a whole series of cascades. And let's just take a close look at the trail maps available for this hike. I'm using the one from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and we'll look at the All Trails map as well. I'm going to zoom in here. Gould Road is on the east side of the Mount Greylock Reservation, right near the town of Adams, Massachusetts. And I parked at the P that's on the furthest west end of Gould Road. There's actually a gate right there. You can't continue any further. I hiked up what's being shown as the Bellows Pipe Trail. It's actually called the Bellows South Trail on all the signage. That goes past some falls, which I couldn't find. The ones I did find were in a different location. Crosses the Thunderbolt Ski Trail, and just above that Thunderbolt Ski Trail is the fork where we couldn't read the sign, but I bared right and continued on the Bellows Pipe Trail to this dotted line that goes up to where it says elevation 2528. That was the overlook on Ragged Mountain. That trail was labeled as the Ragged Mountain Trail, and it was blazed in blue. So that information is pretty accurate, except there's a lot more trails on this side of the mountain than this map shows. So I'll continue on. The summit of Ragged Mountain is shown on all trails, and the trails leading up to it resemble those on the map from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But below the Thunderbolt Ski Trail, there's all kinds of blue lines here that weren't shown on the map from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And those are good trails. I didn't hike all of them, but they're well graded and fairly new. And the one right in the middle there is the one that went to the Ribbons Falls. So those are a little more interesting scenery as you go up the mountain if you have the time to do the extra distance, and not quite as steep as well. So it's also showing some other trails that go up Ragged Mountain from the Greylock Glen development. I didn't try to find those. I didn't see any signs of them. I believe I turned around right about here where that little hook is. And this is a mountain I'd like to explore maybe a little bit more in the future. So that's what there is here. Always be prepared to navigate on your own. Don't rely on cell phone coverage. Don't rely on the maps being accurate. Always be able to decipher the information from the maps and from what you see as you hike if you want to recreate adventures like this, because it's not always as easy as it might seem. Some parks do a great job, some don't. And usually I can find my way as long as I got enough information to do so. We'll continue on with these adventures real soon. Got more waterfall visits planned in the near future.